With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Joe on with me. And Joe called the hotline, which I am so excited about because not very many people actually do that, by the way. Thank you, Joe. But she called and she goes, hey, I have some interesting encounters to share out of New Mexico and out of California where she is right now. Joe, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. I really appreciate it. It's really cool to be somewhere where, to have a platform that you can talk about these things. It's really hard to talk about them with friends, because a lot of people think you're crazy when you bring up stuff with the paranormal. So it's really nice to have a accepting community like you have. Thank you for your show and what you do for people.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have a show without you guys being willing to come on and share. So thank you. Yeah, no, I get it. You talked to I don't remember who said this word. It was only just several shows back. They used the term normies. I think it might have been, what's his name from Fear Daily? Shoot, I'm the worst with names. But he called them normies. And I'm like, yeah, that's what everybody else is. And we're the weirdos over here. And that's okay. That is all right. So I know that I'm assuming we could maybe start with Dulce, New Mexico. That was kind of the initial reason I think that you reached out, right? And then move into some of the stuff that's gone on since then. If that's what you were planning on doing, does that sound good?
Would it be okay if I started kind of from the beginning and just kind of, I don't know, that's my way of, mapping things.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Perfect. All right, so I have a kind of a strange past. I was actually born into a cult, and this is like a Christian cult, non-denominational, a whole lot of you can't speak to anyone outside of the church unless you're sharing the gospel. They pick who you married, they picked who you dated, they picked your career, they had everything planned out for you, and we had to be absolutely perfect as kids. Looking back, we honestly had to put on this almost fake persona just to get by. And it's still operational. It's located in the outskirts of Davis, actually. And there is a lot of other stuff that goes on there, too, that has been reported. Pedophilia, sexual misconduct. There's a lot of abuse that goes on there. And that recently there was a kid, it was an attempted murder. He tried to attack his mother, I believe. And my view on it is he just kind of snapped under all of this trauma and pressure. But it recently brought attention to the cult, and that was a great thing. We ended up, me and a bunch of other people who have gotten out, we talked to the newspaper reporters there, and they did a paper on it. So now people can look back and look up, all this stuff about them, which you couldn't have that before. And I think that's really cool. So the paranormal side of things with that, this is what got my mind into this kind of thing. Basically, there was 12 elders and one pastor, one assistant pastor. And these elders, they would go through a training program and basically govern over certain community members. They would have a section of people. My dad was actually an elder, and they were scary. They were very scary. And they would go through this program. And I remember this happening to someone. This guy came to our church. He was a sweetheart. He was just the nicest person. Everybody liked him. The kids liked him. The adults liked him. And he ended up going through this elder program. And I think about a year later, I saw him when I was getting called into a counseling meeting, which I'll explain what that is in a sec. And I go into the room and I look at him, and he just turns and he gives me this creepy freaking smile. And it was the creepiest thing. And it was just blew my mind that this person could go from this kind-hearted individual to something monstrous and scary. And yeah, so I've always been really fixated on this. Like, what is that? There's something else, attached to it. It's not just like ego. I mean, that's a huge part. Power, but there's something else there that I couldn't, name. Another instance that happened, that we had a woman visit, or she actually went there for a little while, and she was sensitive to things and she could see things that other people really couldn't. And she noticed that when the elders were all up front in front of the congregation on a Sunday, they would all stand up there, and she saw this creature swirling in between them and around them. And at the time, she thought, oh, that's the Holy Spirit. But she realized later that it was something more sinister. Another thing that used to happen was people would start speaking tongues, and they ended up stopping this because when they would translate what the people were saying, it was very negative and had like curse words and like hate, and it was like hate. So I never remember seeing this, but this happened, a little before my time. So with the elders and the pastor, what they would do to kids and adults, they would bring them into church counseling. So this is if you are acting in a way that's not appropriate for example, there was an 11-year-old girl. She ended up kissing a little boy on the cheek. They brought her into the room and they screamed at her for hours. They called her a whore, a slut, what was it? A used woman, and a dirty tampon. All those things she remembers them telling her. And this is an 11-year-old girl. They would do this to us anytime we step out of line, or even if we're just not doing well in like our studies, And it was very, very rigid, very strict. They even had their own private school that we would go through. And so you're being watched 24/7, and you basically are a spy for everyone else too. The people who report other church members for stepping out of line are the ones who are like in the safe zone. So it was very dangerous place to grow up. It was an awful experience, but I am glad I went through it because I'm grateful for surviving it and being able to help people afterwards. We actually recently, so I got out when I was 18. I tried to run away when I was 15. I basically jumped on a bus, went to Old Sac, and then realized that I could not sleep, on the streets, and ended up breaking down and calling my parents. So after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to wait till I'm 18. When I'm 18, I can leave. And, magically, I'll have this ability to leave because that's what 18 is. So I waited till I was 18. It didn't happen. I was still stuck. I had no way of getting out. So I broke down, and I ended up with an eating disorder and some other issues. And I was brought into church counseling again and again. And I would kind of rebel in little ways. And that's why I kept getting brought in. And one day I was so terrified of going to this church counseling that I took a bottle of aspirin, and I told my parents. They took me to the ER. I got treated for it, drank charcoal and everything. And while I was there, the hospital staff were like, okay, you need to speak with a psychiatrist. Would you like to speak with one alone or with your parents? And I said alone. And I requested to go to the mental health inpatient clinic. And they took me there, And I was able to tell a psychiatrist my entire story. And she was like, you know what? We need to get you out. That's what you need. And so she sent me to live with my uncle in Winters, and that's how I escaped. My family didn't end up leaving until I joined the Army, but they did end up leaving, and I was so grateful for that. There's a lot of strange stuff that goes on with darkness, when people have like almost a spiritual sickness, like other paranormal things almost latch onto it. And that was something I really noticed about the cult. Like there was something else there. It was more than just a strict place where they control everything you do. It was dark. And so it's always kind of fascinated me. After the cult, I went into the Army because basically I met my husband, and I was kind of couch surfing for a while and drinking because I didn't know how to process my trauma. So then I joined the Army, and I was like, you know what? I need a change. I need someone to tell me what to do because I don't know what to do. And while I was in the Army, I went to Germany and Iraq, and I had a great time in Iraq, but in Germany I kind of had I never learned how to stand up for myself. So this kind of opened me up to a lot of harassment and bullying. There's a lot of that in the military. So it was hard. But once I got out of the military, I got pregnant with my daughter, and my family had by then left the cult. The way they did it was they said, all right, God is calling us to New York to spread the gospel of this place. And they moved to New York, and once they got there, they cut off all contact with the cult. And so while they were in New York, my husband was in California. So I kind of ended up being more with my husband while I was pregnant with my daughter. Then I moved out with my parents for a while in New York, and then my husband came with me. And he actually worked at a ski resort when he was out there that was very haunted. He said stuff would go on all night because he was night shift, so he would clean. He told me about one situation, and it's weird because we're both very sensitive. So he's had a lot of stuff happen in his past, and then I have had more stuff happen, I think, since I met him. Almost like everything gets crazier when the two of us are together. But he remembers that there was one ghost that would just play pranks on him. And one time he saw this red floating balloon, just like it, and it scared the crap out of him. After New York, we moved back to California, and that's when stuff started getting really crazy. So at this time, we moved into a house that was kind of on the edge of Winters, and this house was very, very, very haunted. It's still the most haunted house I've ever encountered. Stuff would happen, lights would turn on and off. So while we were in this house, the lights would turn on and off. We would hear voices, and I can picture it right now. I would hear my husband's voice coming from outside calling my name. And I would go out there, and I know, he's not home. He's somewhere else, and he would be nowhere. I think we would plug something in, and it would be unplugged 10 minutes later. The basement, it would turn on out of nowhere. No one would go down there, and it would just turn on. So it was a regular thing where we would just have to go down in the basement and turn off the light for unknown reasons. And one experience I remember especially vividly, we were sitting out, and this was kind of our ritual. We would at night, we would drink a beer while the kid was asleep, and we would just, sit on the porch. And I heard my daughter say, "Mama, Mama." And I was like, oh my goodness, did she wake up? So I run inside. Nope, she's passed out. She was out like a light. And So I come back out and I hear the voice again. And this time I just follow it. And it is identical to my kid's voice. And I follow it and I'm just standing there in the grass and there's nothing there, you know. And it was pretty trippy. But this sort of activity happened so much, eventually we kind of got used to it almost. And the bad part, this is something I didn't know about spirits, but they can drain you. So we got to a point where we were sleeping for days and it made no sense. Like me, my husband, and my daughter, we would just be on a mattress with the TV in front of us in the living room. Maybe we got sick or something, and that's why we kind of all camped out there. But we would sleep for days at a time, and it kind of eventually clued me in, like they can use you as almost a battery sometimes. And I don't know exactly how. I do know that there are ways of protecting yourself. I've learned them over time, but back then, yeah, I had no idea. After we moved from that house, we moved, I think, back to New York. We kind of just followed. Oh, no, sorry. That's when we moved to New Mexico. So we kind of followed around family. I was really young, and I realized that the best life for my kids is to have multiple people around to help. And so we moved to New Mexico where his mother-in-law was living. So we moved out to get her, or to be with her. That's the pretty wild side of things. I absolutely love New Mexico. There is just something about it. And there was so much going on there, stuff that I still, don't know if I can really explain. But we first moved to Albuquerque, and not a whole lot happened while I was there. But after that, we moved to Chama, New Mexico. And we found out that we found out later that Chama is next to the supposed Dulce base in New Mexico. And we researched that, and it was pretty horrifying, the things that people say about it. But the one thing that everyone has in common in Dulce, New Mexico, is that every person who lives there, like, knows that UFOs are there. They tell you their own stories, and they're like, "Oh yeah, there's UFOs." Like everyone says this, which is pretty wild. Every night, like almost every night. I don't know if every night, but every night we would sit out and we would watch for the lights, because there would always be lights. Like there'd always be strange lights in the sky doing something. I think one time we were even followed by a light on a dark mountain road at one point. The scariest thing that happened, I would say, was when we were sitting in our garage, and this still blows my mind. But we were sitting in there, me and my husband, and it was, our ritual where we go and we sit in there after the kid falls asleep and have a beer. And all of a sudden, I just wake up and I look around me and I'm like, oh my God, what time is it? Did we sleep? Like, I'm thinking it's like maybe midnight, because it was just 11 or something. And I look at the clock and it's 4 a.m. And we're sitting there and we're not laying. And I look around me, and the table we had was overturned. It was upside down. My beer had been thrown across the garage and was broken. His was on the ground. And so and our garage door had been halfway open. So it was still halfway open. So we literally have 4 or 5 hours of our life that just is gone. And I went and I talked to more people over the years while I was in New Mexico, and a lot of people in that area, and in Pagosa Springs, which was where I was at too, Colorado, a lot of people have that happen to them, where they would disappear anywhere from 2 hours to 12 hours at a time, are all the stories I've heard. So that was pretty scary, and it really made us like, we didn't know if UFOs were real going to New Mexico, I would say. But once we got there, we believed in so much more, you know? There was so much out there in New Mexico. So another thing that happened while we were in this house is so I wasn't here. It was my husband was at home and he was with the dogs and my kid, my daughter. He hears the dogs just start barking at the end of the street, like a ways away. And then he hears a pounding and then it kind of travels. So it travels down the street and it's getting closer and closer to him. And we have 3 dogs. Two of them are very tough dogs. One, I think, is part dingo, honestly. We adopted him out in New Mexico. And I remember seeing his mom, and she did not look like a normal dog. And looking back, she might have been a dingo. So we took him in, and he was a really tough dog. Like, he had a lot of spunk. So as this noise is coming closer towards the house, the dogs just lose it. And usually they're very like aggressive, you know, they bark. But these dogs, they were just about to like pee themselves and they were just cowering. So my husband, he takes everybody, they go in the bed and they all hide under the blanket and cuddle together while they hear the pounding on our front door. And eventually it moves on and goes down the street. But you can just hear the dogs just losing it. So he doesn't know what that was, but it clearly terrified them. My husband also saw something else, and I wish I had seen this myself because I ask him about it all the time. He's honestly tired of explaining it to me. But we were driving on a back road somewhere around that area, and he looks out the window and he sees a creature. And he said it looked like a bear, but its hair was like a red orange and it was all standing up, almost like it was like surprised. He said that the eyes didn't look right. They were almost cartoonish is how he describes it. And that the creature kind of looked surprised, like shocked to see him. But yeah, so in my theory, like it's what I would call a skinwalker, I guess, but that was my favorite story, I think, of his. All right, so let me check. I got a couple notes. My daughter did run off at the time, so we had a very safe area. There weren't many people around, and my daughter was very adventurous. So sometimes she would sneak out of bed while we were asleep and get the dogs and then somehow break out of the house. And she did this one time, but didn't bring the dogs. We went looking for her. As soon as we woke up, we were just like blind panic. And we find her kind of in this area. It's like a little creek, and she's yelling for us, and that's how we found her. She's standing by the creek, and I guess she saw a snake or something. There was no snake around when we saw it, when we looked at the creek, but she swore up and down that she had been hanging out with this horse. And we're like, honey, there's no horses around here. There's no, like, even the terrain it's impossible, you know, for a horse to be around here. But to this day, she swears she had a horse that brought her down there. And so, yeah, no explanation for that one either. So another thing I saw on a road, so we would drive from Chama to Colorado sometimes. And along that road, I saw, so there was like a side of a kind of a mountain, sort of like a rock mountain. And I looked over and there was a hangar, like a giant aircraft hangar, just like in the side of that mountain. And I looked at it and I was like, huh, That's weird. I never saw that before. I wonder what that's for. So on the trip back, I looked, I searched, I watched for it, and I never saw it again. Every time I'd go down that road, I would look for it, but I would never find it. So yeah, that was strange as well. Let's see. I also saw another creature, and this was also on a dark road. So there's a lot of areas out there that are just very much forest and reservation, and not many houses, not many people. And we were driving up this road, and it was a dog. A dog walked out into the road, and I drove past it because it didn't get in our way. It was kind of on the side of the road, but it didn't look right. Like, it was extra big, and its legs were like extra long, and it was huge. It was black, and it was night, so I didn't get like the best view of it, but it definitely raised the hair on my neck and scared me. So my husband always asked me about that story because I was the only one to see that. So I'm going to take a step into the present, because with the disappearances, this actually happened pretty recent, about 2 years ago. So in winters, where we live now, there is a tractor parade that goes by, and this happens every like Christmas time. So it's like a big parade for the community, and people who live in the town work on the floats and put effort into it. So my husband happens to work at a place that was doing one of these floats. So him and his coworkers, they worked on these floats, and once the parade had finished and they were all done, it was like maybe 9 o'clock at night, and they take off walking because there's so much traffic. They already planned to walk each other to their homes. So he's walking with them, and they're just talking and having fun. And he said that his coworkers just told him he was there 1 second, and then he was gone. And this is on a main street, like a busy street during heavy traffic. So he just disappears. The next morning, I'm on my way to work. I actually was headed out. It was around 6 in the morning, and I'm on the drive, and he calls me, and isn't making a whole lot of sense. He's kind of like mumbling, and he's like, I need a ride. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm on my way to work. I can't get you. I'm thinking that he got drunk and he just passed out at somebody's house and doesn't know where he is. Didn't happen often. He's pretty responsible, but from time to time, it can happen if maybe he drank hard alcohol or something. So, but he tells me that, in fact, he kind of just woke up at 6 in the morning, and he's looking at a pair of headlights, and a person gets out of the vehicle, and he's just in the middle of a road, comes up to him and says, like, hey, are you okay? And he says, where's Winters? How do I get back? And the man points to a bunch of lights in the distance, and it's about like 2 miles out, maybe 3. And so he walks all the way back to Winters. So when he tells me about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, you like disappeared. And he said that his whole body, felt like he'd been beat up. And we realized that he had on his Fitbit. So we were like, oh my gosh, like, let's look at the activity on it and see if there's anything. So we looked at the activity, and from the time he disappeared with his friends, there's nothing. And then you wait about, I think, 1 to 2 hours, and there was a like blip, and there was a whole lot of movement for about an hour. And then after that, nothing until 6 a.m. So that was pretty freaking creepy. And yeah, so those are our two times where we lost parts of our lives and have no idea what happened. He didn't have a mark on his body, but he felt terrible. And he said like every muscle hurt in his body. And yeah, he was miserable for a couple of days.
Now, what about the first incident with the 4 hours in the garage? Did you guys have any marks on you after that incident?
No, honestly, I didn't feel like I was beat up or anything like that. This time was different. Yeah.
I mean, that's just so nuts because in the garage, and I mean, they're both very interesting encounters, but in the garage incident, you said that there was the tables turned and beers flung around. I mean, as if there was some kind of a scuffle. That's terrifying.
Right? Yeah.
And
so scary.
And there was no reason to think that anyone had been in the house at all.
Nope. Nothing like that.
Wow.
Yeah. My kid was still fast asleep in her room, and we had his mom there too. And yep, she didn't experience anything.
Wow,
But
that is so strange. And for 4 hours to be sitting in the garage and you're not remembering what's going on. I mean, I'm sure you guys enjoy sitting in the garage, but you'd be like, well, we don't want to sit out here for 4 friggin' hours.
Yeah, exactly. And we were sitting is the weird thing, and when we woke up, we were sitting too. If you fall asleep, you're not going to, I don't know. It's just, weird. Another thing that's happened to us as far as ghost activity. So, we only have theories for the aliens, or who knows, the government. I really don't know because I can't say. I totally believe in anything could be possible at this point. So I'm an open mind in that area. But there's also a lot of activity that happens around here, believe it or not. I have a friend who lives in town, and he's had experiences like these too. Not quite the same. He saw what took him, and he explains it like, I know there's a type of alien that is like white and like tall and like human like kind of. Those are the ones he remembers being there, and when he was abducted. He also had experiences as a kid too, and so we kind of like to pick each other's brains about stuff. But since he's not here to tell it, I can't really, I probably do an injustice by rephrasing. But we also had some other kinds of paranormal activity as well over time. So one thing that keeps happening with us is that we will get, out of nowhere, we'll get these strange scratch marks on us. So I'll send you a picture of this, but we've woken up with them a lot of times, and they're very like skinny, and there's 3, and then there's like a little dew claw, do you know what I mean? Like a small little claw mark with it. And they all kind of combine into one, which is weird. So they start out separated, and then they kind of come together. And then you always see the like little dew claw. Not always. Sometimes you don't. But I found them on my daughter's neck when she's woken up from sleep in the morning. And I found them mostly on my husband, I would say. He's the one who gets them. And he was taking a nap one time, and I was just sitting, like he was leaned up against me asleep. And he literally woke up and looked at his arm, and there were the marks right there. Like they just appeared. And the weirdest one I had was I was driving in the car, and I was talking to a friend about these marks because they were scaring me. And I had ones literally appear right before my eyes on my leg. So we're still not sure exactly what kind of creature this is, but we have learned ways of kind of protecting ourselves. So I actually went to go work at a fire department in San Francisco. And while I was working there, I had a great time. I loved it there, but I got sent to work at a station that was known for not being very accepting towards women. And when I went there, there was like, when you walk into this station, you could feel the weight. Like you could feel it. It was horrible. Like you walk in and it's just like you're just fighting to have your own space, you know, your own energy around you. And it's very so while I was there, I actually tried to find, I'm like, I need to find someone who knows about this stuff. I need to find someone who can help me with all this spiritual stuff. And I actually found a woman, and she's a psychic and a healer, and we're still very close friends. She's taught me a heck of a lot on how to manage all this stuff. So she helped me get through those 6 months at that station. It was, one of the ways was like going around and like blessing the area. Honestly, nothing worked. Like something would work like a little bit, and there would be like a little lightness, you know, for a little while, but then it would just come right back. So she actually looked into it, and she believes that there are actual like portals almost that are like open around the station, like hotspots, like really high amounts of energy. And there was actually these masks that were super creepy, and she believed that maybe some of it was connected to these masks. They were I would ask other people too. I had another girl who was sensitive work with me at that station, and she agreed with me on everything. So that was really validating. I mean, going through all this, you feel like you're insane, and most people will look at you like you're insane. But I know this is real. Like it is. There's so much out there. There's so much. And I'll give you an example of something I experienced that it's a little weird, like not a lot of psychic people have heard of this. So I got migraines. I suffered from migraines for a while. I actually got the depot shot, and I think my body reacted to that, and I ended up having these insane migraines for about 4 or 5 months. I was just bedridden. I could barely eat. It was just terrible. And there was one day I remember, it was my birthday. I remember that. I was laying in bed, and I looked up, and I could see like it was like a spider. It was a kind of like a robot type of spider, like if you would imagine a spider as steampunk, kind of like that. I look over at my feet, and I see this thing, and it's just twirling above my feet, like midair. And I look up at the ceiling, and there's a whole bunch of these things, like maybe 8. And I kind of just was like, you know what? I'm just, haven't been eating. I'm hallucinating, whatever. I went ahead and I kind of it kept bugging me. So I went ahead and I did a deep dive into this rabbit hole. And I found out from other people that there are things that are called astral spiders. And I guess they're a kind of a creature. They're not like negative or, good. They're just kind of like a bug almost. Like they feed off of leaking energy almost. So they will suck you dry. Like if you have if you don't have your protection up, if you have like a sort of leak in your energy, like say you're suffering from some trauma and you're like having issues with it, and like that could potentially like be a spot for them to latch on and be able to suck out your energy, like a sort of a weakness. I ended up doing like a lot of meditating and like a lot of just trying to create my own field, and it was constant. Like I could feel them almost, which is weird. So another thing with them is they have a sort of a stinger on them that like they stick you with, and it numbs you. And this was super weird because I would have these spots on my body that were completely numb, and I could not feel anything. So at some point, it was I think I got a little paranoid because I'm like, oh my God, where is it? Where is it? But I just kept like putting that protective barrier over me and like meditating with like healing frequency music and crystals, and like I would just meditate constantly and just focus on having like this energy field around me, and eventually they did go away. Another thing that helps is calling out to Archangel Michael. So I don't know like why all these things work. I'm not religious anymore. I kind of just, glean what I can from other people and put it together. I don't know why these things work, and I don't know what I truly believe. I just believe that there is a lot more out there, and to try and have it all down and have it in a box or categorize it is just impossible, at this point. So I just kind of go with the flow, and what works, I keep, and I have an open mind. Okay, so what else? Oh, yeah, I learned a lot from this woman, the psychic. We're still very close friends, and I call her anytime I need anything. She helped me. She's very knowledgeable on the spiritual side, and she taught me how to help. So, okay, she taught me Reiki. So I got to learn that, and I can't explain it. Like, I don't know how this works. Like, by all reasons of the imagination, this should not work. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I went into it very skeptical, but for some reason, like, it does work, it defies logic. So I'm just, yeah, going with the flow now. But she also had these other women come in too. And one of these women, she was new to the whole psychic thing. And she told us that she went home and she was like so excited to like help these spirits out, right? And she was going to be able to connect with all of these different spirits of people, and help them. And so she called out to them and she's like, I'm here to help you, come and I'll try to help you. And I guess that was a very big mistake, because she said that all of a sudden, like, over the course of a day, her whole house was just packed. Like, these spirits just moved in. And she said, like, she couldn't barely move past them. Like, they were just everywhere. So she called the psychic, and the psychic came, and one by one, like, they helped each spirit cross over and eventually cleared the whole place out. But I remember them telling that story, and I thought it was funny. Since then, I actually did encounter some spirits that I was able to do that with. I don't know if I helped them cross over, but I went through that process that she taught me, and I did feel like a feeling of peace. So I hope I helped in some way. I think that there are spirits of people, spirit guides, people who once lived here, as well as other things. I think that there are other things in the spirit world that don't classify, weren't ever a human. I was doing Reiki on someone from a distance, and this time I kind of got like almost stabbed it felt like I was being stabbed in my stomach, and I felt so sick afterwards. And after that, I talked with the psychic, and she was like, okay, we're going to fix you. And she investigated, and it was an entity that was attached to that person that lashed out. So there's stuff like that, taking care of your spirit is hard work. You have to like keep yourself clear. Our house would get frequent visitors. It still does, honestly. We've had things. I guess it would technically be a poltergeist. I haven't had anything so scary and crazy like, the horror movies, but there would be stuff falling out of cabinets, doors opening and closing, that sort of thing, things turning on and off. And I just go through the house and I take sage and I clear it, and I kind of use my own incantation I kind of want to share this because I really like it, just in case someone's having issues and needs help clearing that energy. So, what I say is, by the power of the Great Mother, by the power of the mighty Lord, I exorcise all seeds of evil. I cast upon them a spell of power and holiness, that they may be bound as with thick chains of iron and cast into the outer darkness, that they may trouble not we who are servants of love and light. And that is what the psychic taught me to say. And I have seen it work like lots of times. And you just have to be in a good place. You kind of like clean your body off, as it were. All you have to do is kind of put your hands over your whole body and swipe, like you're swiping off all the negative vibes. Do that real quick. Get your sage and then go counterclockwise through the house and make sure that a door or a window is open so that it can push whatever it is out. For some reason, they need to have a sort of an exit. And yeah, that works for me pretty well. So sorry if that was, it was kind of on a tangent. But,
no, I think that was a great tangent. And then everybody can just essentially replay that whole part because you just killed that. You just breezed right through it. And they're like, I'm going to use this verbatim because I'm just going to play this through my speakers and walk around the house.
It is. Yeah, I don't know why it works, but it does. Yeah, there's a lot of just neat things out there. And one thing I realized is like, yeah, there's almost, if you, religions all have something in them that rings powerful. And I think that's like a person coming from a good place, So even if a person is going through the house and clearing it with in the name of Jesus, all this stuff, like if they believe in it in like that good kind of like spirit sort of thing, in a good way, like they're a good person and they try to use religion for good, I think it's just as powerful, as using like what I did. And Michael the Archangel, that's like the big protector one that seems to work really, really fast as well. Yeah, I've kind of been going on to witchy sort of tangent and or in life, and like going towards the learning more about Reiki and all this stuff. And even though I'm very skeptical because I came from this very religious background, so a part of me is like, never, no religion, no rituals or anything like that. There's still like something in it that rings true. So I don't know what that is exactly, but I kind of just use it to help me in life. And yeah, it's been very, very helpful. I have kind of a group of people who are like a little witchy, which is cool. And yeah, it's a great support group. And even my family, because they're very skeptical at first, and my husband too, even though he's got a lot of psychic knowledge as well, naturally. He actually saw some pretty crazy things as a kid too. He saw like what he describes as a demon standing outside of his door. Oh, I hear that echo now. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it's kind of started a little bit. I don't know if you opened your door or something, or maybe I don't know if a text came through or something. Yeah, it kind of, I don't know what happened, but it sounds okay. But yeah, now you've got an echo. Huh?
Well, honestly, I was pretty much at the end of things anyway. If you had any questions for me, like I'd gladly give you any answers I can think of.
Yes, I do, actually, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right, so because I was just letting you go through and I was taking my notes, so I wanted to zip back to kind of the beginning. And this is me saying right out of the gate, I don't expect you to give me a name at all. And before I say this, also, you are a very brave and well-adjusted woman considering what it sounds like you went through with that cult. But is this, and again, I'm not expecting you to give me a name, is this a known cult that, maybe you could go and watch a Netflix documentary on some of the heinous things that they were up to?
So that's kind of cool that you will ask. So I actually went through a phase where I was like, I need to get this information out. I needed to. So I got a hold of other survivors and we kind of got together and did like a little podcast. You can look it up. It's just like 6 episodes. It's called The Art of Decultstruction. So it's like a play on words there. And we put that out. And a lady contacted me about 4 months ago and said that she was interested in doing possibly a documentary on it. And she does work for Netflix. So it
Oh,
might happen in the future. I have no qualms stating what this place is. The place is called Grace Valley Christian Center, and it's located in Davis.
so I'm writing all that down because I wanted to link, if that's okay, I'll link the podcast, The Art of Decultstruction. I do like that play on words, by the way. So, I mean,
Thanks.
wow. So they just straight up just call themselves a Christian school, Christian center. No qualms about that, huh? And under this
Yeah.
huge guise of light and love. And that's the last thing it sounds like it is.
Yes. Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I will link all of that in the show notes, intofrayradio.com for this episode. So, okay, next up was the mimic situation, right? Like you'd hear your husband and it would be this exact copy of your husband's voice outside. Do you feel like it was trying to get you to go somewhere with it?
Maybe. Once I realized it wasn't my husband though, I didn't want to go. But quite possibly, yes.
Do you feel like it was besides the fact that you just knew it wasn't him, was there any other indication that it wasn't? Was it off in any sort of a way?
No, it was perfect as far as I remember. Same with the voice calling from my daughter's voice. It was pretty exactly like how she sounds.
Mm. Those mimics are so creepy. I gotta tell you, if I heard that in my house, I'd be I'd be like, okay, Joe, come to my house and do the thing with the sage and that whole thing that you did that the psychic taught you. I'm like, you're coming here. Okay, so when your daughter ran off that time without the dogs, how old was she at that point?
She would have been about 4, I would say, 4 or 5.
Oh my goodness, so young. And
Mm.
I can imagine the panic, as you said, that you guys were in. Now, I mean, that's pretty incredible that you find her, she's by some water, which a lot of paranormal things happen around the water, but then she says there was a snake and a horse.
Yeah. Mhm.
Did she say that she rode upon the horse or that the horse was just like hanging out there, taking care of her?
No, the horse, yeah, was hanging out with her, kind of, yeah, taking care of her, I guess
Wow.
would be, yeah. Honestly, I think she did say that the horse protected her from the snake.
Ah. Wow. And of course you're probably looking around and you're like, there's no hoof tracks, there's no indication that
Yes.
any of these things were here.
Yes, exactly.
How
Mhm.
long was she missing?
It was only we woke up and we heard her calling, basically. So, I
Okay.
think we heard her screaming.
So she probably like got out of the house and realized, oh geez, maybe I can't find my way back, or it's finally I'm scared or whatever, and she decided to start hollering.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. So we woke up kind of just in a panic. When we got outside though, I think was when we heard her yelling. And so we lived on this street that was kind of right next to a drop off. So there was like a drop off into the forest. We lived like right around the forest. There was forest everywhere. So the creek, it wasn't too far. Maybe, yeah, I'm bad at like length and distance, but I would say it was within maybe like a couple blocks. If you could see a couple blocks in terms of like a street view, that's how far.
And you said that she normally would take the dogs with her, like she knew they were, or maybe
Yeah,
they were just attached to her, huh? So if she would go, they
they
would go.
were. She honestly, it was a very safe neighborhood at the time, and she would get on her bike. And my mother-in-law worked like down the street, so she was kind of right there. And it was the Bureau of Reclamation, so it was they're often in the forested areas. And my daughter would just take her little bike, and she would get on it and ride around town with this just pack of dogs, following her everywhere. But yeah, I was also a young parent, so there are things I would do differently now. But at the time, it seemed totally fine.
Well, hey, when kids want to do something, they can figure it out, you know?
Yes, she was very much that type of personality too.
Now, was she scared by that situation at all to where then she didn't go out again after that? Or what was, I
Nope.
mean, it didn't really bother her?
No, the horse did not scare her at all. Like that was her friend. The snake was what scared her.
Do you wonder, I mean, especially considering what you've shared with all of this, do you wonder what those things really were?
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. We went ahead and called it a skinwalker, but I have no idea, honestly.
Yeah. The drive from Shama to Colorado, and you mentioned seeing, and I don't know if so was this part of the drive actually in Colorado where you've got like these sweeping essentially rock faces right next to the wall in some parts of Colorado. I've driven through there once. Do you recall, and this is the disappearing hangar essentially, which is so cool because of course we've heard other stories of similar things. Do you recall right around where that quote unquote hangar in the mountain would have been?
Honestly, no, I don't really remember the exact landmark. It was just a long stretch of that type of road.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all kind of similar. I think at one point I was like, it's got to be around here in like some mile, area. But I honestly don't remember where it was.
That's all right. I'm the same way. As I said, I've been through Colorado once, and one part of the drive was depending on which direction you're going, of course, but let's go with this direction, whatever that would have been, is the other two lanes, the other two directions are hundreds of feet above you. And then on each side of you is just, as I said, these sheer rocks mountains essentially, that just climb into the sky. It was one of the most incredible roads I have ever been on in my life. And I will never forget that. But I couldn't tell you where that was. I'm sure that people are screaming at their devices right now, and they know exactly where I'm talking about. If I bother to look it up, I'm sure I could find it. But Colorado has got some really cool spots. Okay, so going to Dulce, what, if anything, did the Dulce locals say about, oh, if you look up Dulce, it's underground bases, aliens live there, there's many different races, there's all kinds of things that you can look up about Dulce. Will the locals talk about that, or was that like, we don't speak about the aliens under the ground?
They'll talk about it. Yeah,
Well,
they completely agree there's a base, at least from the people I've talked to. They all, every person I talked to in Dulce was like, oh yeah, yeah. I think they just accepted it as a part of life, like it was their everyday thing, and they always saw strange things and had weird encounters. So I think at that point, it's old news. I don't think
right.
they're. So yeah, I think they'd be willing to talk to anybody, really.
I love that when a place embraces their quote unquote monsters, or whatever the local weirdness is. They're just like, yeah, we're all about it. Okay, so do you feel that one or both of you, meaning your husband, of course, have been taken somewhere at some point?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, you got missing
Yep.
time. You have the marks appearing on your body, which, by the way, you have also had those marks. When they appear, does it hurt? Does it burn? Like, it seems like
Yes.
it does. Does it burn or hurt? Sorry, I kind of said two
burns.
different things. Okay.
Yep.
Because your
I
husband,
wouldn't-
it seems like before they actually appeared, he like jumped up and looked, and then they kind of seemed to appear, like physically appear there, but he had already felt it before they showed, it sounds like.
Let me think. It could be at the same time.
Okay.
But it's a burning feeling. Yeah, it's a burning feeling.
I mean, that's very much like, and I'm not trying to compare it to, ghost hunting on TV or anything, but that's very much like what, we've seen happen. If said shows are actually, if that's what's going really on, is especially in threes, right? You said it was 3 and like a dew claw situation. Now you kind of describe it more like, not something, and not that you're going to know, of course, but it's not so much alien, but more of like a creature type of a thing is what you made it sound like you guys feel like it is then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That is what I feel it is. Yeah.
Now, do you feel like that is related to the missing time, or this is something separate?
I think it's something separate, but it very well could be related. Another thing I forgot to mention is I have seen, so I had no idea this was a thing. Still blows my mind. Not sure if I completely believe it, but according to the psychic, fairies are real. So I've actually seen a couple things that made me wonder. So I was in my room and I saw this thing and it just like fluttered and then it disappeared. And I saw it again really recently outside. It was flying at me and I just saw the flutter of the wings and like a brief glimpse of the wings, and it went under a cardboard box and disappeared. But yeah, so we have like a little fairy offering place now. We've got like a bunch of crystals, and my kids put out like little candies and stuff because supposedly that's what they like. But it's kind of a fun thing to think about, even if that's not at all what it is,
So the psychic, I mean, have you ever asked her, have I or we been taken? What happened to my husband when he was miles from home? What happened in the garage that day for 4 hours? Has she ever postulated any information as far as what's gone on with those situations?
I always viewed the spiritual world and the aliens as so separate. But in my mind, I guess it's easier for other people to accept, the ghosts and stuff over aliens. So I tend not to bring that up as much. And I honestly haven't asked her, but I'm definitely going to ask her now that you bring it up.
Yeah, I just wonder if, essentially you could call a psychic a remote viewer in some way, shape, or form. Like maybe she could kind of view what's gone on there. I don't know if you want to know. I mean, there's also that side of the coin, but would you want to know?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the whole thing, like what happened during that 4 hours? Do we get taken aboard a ship? What creates these marks on our bodies, right? Because if that is a separate thing, then, I mean, you could be opening up 2-3 different cans of worms, right?
Yeah, I want to know all of it. Yeah, definitely. I want to know it all. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I like that answer. I suppose, though, considering your childhood, you're probably like, bring it on. Like, I can handle this.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Right.
And also, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. I've definitely been through some rocky times in my life as well. I drank a lot to deal with the trauma, but ended up quitting, and now I'm on a much better path. But it's had its ups and downs for sure. And what I want to do is I want to get into the nursing field and deal with other kids who've been abused. It's called like a SART nurse or a SANE nurse, forensic nurse, and be one of those. And so I can help other people who've been through situations like mine. I think it's so healing to help others, experiencing the same trauma.
When I think without going through it, we can empathize, but there's no way to know. So I think you would be excellent at that. Absolutely. And can I just say thank you for not only sharing the paranormal stuff, but even just bringing up all that cult stuff. You didn't mention that in the voicemail on the hotline. And I thank you for being willing to even bring that up. And can I just say that Joe does have a sinus infection right now, and she still decided to get on here and talk to me. So thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It feels so good to talk to somebody about this stuff and be believed. I really appreciate what you're doing. And oh my gosh, your voice is amazing. I listened to the first podcast I listened to with you, and I was like, oh my God, she's got the radio voice down perfectly. So I think you're doing a great job, and you're the perfect person to be doing it.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. I guess I, like most people, cannot stand the sound of my voice. So that's probably why over the years, I've just talked less and less. I'm like, when I edit, I don't want to hear myself very much. I want to hear the guests. But if we're in contact now. If you do talk to your psychic friend and that stuff happens to come up, I would love to learn about what she says if you're willing to share. It doesn't have to be for everybody. It can just be between us. But I would love to know what her thoughts or what she gets from that.
I will let you know as soon as I find out.
And as I mentioned, Joe called the Into the FRAY hotline. Now, she didn't call and leave all of this information, of course, on the hotline. She wanted to hop on and actually talk to me about all of it, which is amazing. But she called and left a voicemail and said, hey, I have some things I would like to share. Get in touch with me. If you want to call the hotline, you can either call the hotline and let me know you want to speak to me, you want to come on the show. Excellent. Or you can call and leave your story there. Now, obviously, it probably wouldn't need to be a very long story. It wouldn't be very fun to call back every 3 or 4 minutes. However, call the hotline 702-714-0094. Put that thing to work. Not everybody likes using email. Pick up the phone and call.